That's too cute. That's too cute.
That one's a tearjerker.
Make a nice bullion there,
Oh, my goodness. Sometimes laughter is just the energy you need in the morning. Good morning, daily huddlers. I am
morning.
Tara Heaton, and we are here on Tuesdays with my co-host, Kathryn Sabol, and we talk everything communication and relationships. We are so passionate about effective communication because we know that it builds better relationships, and better relationships makes for better families, better communities, better business, better life. So we are here today to explore something that affects our relationships, and I'm afraid it could be negatively. Our question for today is, how is stress showing up in your relationships? So I have given this a lot of thought, and it might be vulnerable today because that's a tough thing to really shine a light on, but I am going to take this question to Kathryn and see what she has to say.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. I mean, the question is, how is it not showing up in your relationships, right? So I had a situation recently where I got a text from a friend, and I'd been meaning to call her all week. It had been longer than normal. And I sent her a text back, and what she sent back felt hurt to me. And I was like, oh, shoot, I've totally offended her. And I was like, no worries. I'm going to send her a text message tomorrow. I'll give her a call. Fine. So I did that. No response. No response to my text. No response to my call. Very unlike her. And I was like, okay, I know I've offended her now, right? So I waited several days, called her again. This story is building up. I've started to talk to people about it. Like, I'm so afraid that I've made her mad. Like, I don't, and like lots of energy going towards it. Y'all can probably see where this is going. But anyway, so I was really bummed about this and decided to send her a really direct text message and said, hey, like, are you upset with me? Like, I haven't heard from you and it's not like you. And like, just, yeah, what's going on? She writes me back immediately, and I'm like a little nervous to pick up the phone because I was unsure what was going to come through. Like, maybe she really is mad at me and she's about to like let me have it. And her message said, everything's fine. I called you back yesterday and left you a message that I never saw, you
Oh,
know, never saw the message. And the reason I bring this up under the question of how is stress impacting our relationships, it's because the one thing that stress does is lowers our resiliency. Like when we're stressed, we don't have the same resources. And in another situation, that whole situation could have happened with this friend of mine where one, I probably would have checked my phone messages, and two, I don't think I would have thought all of those thoughts. I wouldn't have spent all of the time, energy, and effort. But when I get stressed and my resiliency is low, my voices, saboteur voices in my head, start amping up. So they start telling me things, and I start listening and I start doing things according to that, And so I think if I had one thing that we could take away from this today as we go through the conversation, it's how do we become aware? How do we become aware of where we are so that we don't let stress get in the driver's seat and infiltrate our relationships? I spent a lot of time and energy building a big gap between me and my friend who actually wasn't there. And it was because I was so stressed thinking of other things and thinking I'm not good enough, I've done something wrong and all of that, the voices, et cetera. So anyway, I am curious, Tara, how stress shows up in your relationships, because I know that it's different for everybody. And that I think there's some universal truths about what we can do to try and minimize the impact, especially the negative impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think let's talk first, I guess, about how it shows up, and I'd love to hear how it shows up in relationships with other people. And then, what are some solutions around this so we don't repeat behaviors? For me, stress shows up in the most precious of relationships that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can conceal it when I get on a business call or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I mean, I might not be as connected with the person or as intentional. Maybe I haven't given it my best, but why is it that when we're stressed, we have the ability to still put a smile on our face for acquaintances, strangers, but when it comes to our family, that's where, for me, that's where the stress shows up. And I just even have an example from yesterday. Caroline was at her dad's house and she must have called me, I don't know, 5 times. And so I'm thinking, and a lot of the work that I do is creative. And I've created this because, and I'm working on a deadline, and I've created this because I have not put parameters around how often she can call. So I'm feeling a little bit of guilt, a little bit of stress, looking at the deadline. Finally get in the car to drive somewhere, and I call her back, and she goes on and on and on about wanting something done to her hair where she can wake up and it's perfect. And
I want that too. I want that too. By the way, if I call you 5 times, can I get that?
So I finally snapped and said, I don't ever want to hear about this again. We've gone around and around and around and around about this. So all that to say that when I'm stressed, what shows up in my relationships is a lack of patience.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I've gotten a lot better at not being that way. But I've done that twice in the past few weeks with her, and that is pretty rare for me. And I know that that is because of stress. I wasn't my best person, and I've got to figure out a way to better deal with these cycles of conversations rather than just letting it eat at me until I come unglued and say something that I don't want to say. So for me, stress shows up in lack of patience, which inevitably I'm going to say something that does not represent the person that I want to be.
Yeah. I am curious. I mean, you asked the question, why do we do this to the people that we love the most and that are closest to us? Because I'm the same way. Like, why am I taking this out on my son? I could have just taken it out on the person who I don't, who it's about, with
Yep.
whom I don't have a close relationship. I mean, part of me thinks it's wonders. We know they will always be there. We have more leeway because, like, they love us and they're not going to leave. I don't know. I am curious what you think about why is it? Does it make sense?
I have for a long time suspected, and this is, I think, more with younger people, that they take their stress out on their parents because in healthy cases, they don't believe the person will go anywhere. They know they won't. But when I think back to sometimes when I've let stress affect my relationship with Mike, I feel like in a little bit, and not, I wasn't doing this like intentionally, but when I analyze it and look back on it, I wonder if a little bit I'm testing him to see how far I can push him and make sure he won't go away.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I just wondered that, like the boundary piece of it. Because when you were talking, I was like, well, some people wouldn't stand for that. I mean, if I just met somebody and they said that to me, I'd be like, okay, that's not a relationship I'd like to have, and I would walk away.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is interesting. Just, I don't know about the pushing so far to see how they'll go, but I also think that as humans, we do push boundaries. And so it's like, oh, well, there was no reaction to that, so I guess I could do that again. If I'm not checking myself, that's not how I want to be. But if I'm not checking myself, then, so it is an interesting
I also think as we're talking about this, Kathryn, that it's not making sense. Like, why would stress cause me to do that? And so here's where I land. When we are stressed, as you've mentioned, we're not resourced. Therefore, we feel much less confident about the partner that we can be, about the friend that we can be, about the sales associate that we can be. So stress messes with our confidence and our belief in ourselves. And I think that's when, we don't feel as good about ourselves. So that's when it affects, that's partly, I think, why it's affecting those close relationships, because we want to be reminded that the person is going to be there and love us no matter what.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because there is another side to this for me. Like, I was just talking to Tom about this, that's how I showed up with a friend, right? Lack of confidence, not feeling great. But I've talked about this, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. The way stress shows up for me in my personal relationship often is through righteousness. So it's kind of the opposite of lack of confidence. It's I am right. I am right. And it's like, I notice that feeling where I have very little patience. that, like, let's just move this on. Let's just, and so I think it can show up in different ways for different people based on their history, context, whatever. And I think that the important thing to note, like I said before, is like what I would love for us to take away from it is the awareness. Because I've started to notice a feeling that I get when I get like this, like tense and like, and it's like, oh, that's the feeling where I'm about to come in and be right.
Yeah.
All
right. So I'm going to push back on you a little bit on that.
Okay.
Righteousness, when you're feeling stressed and you don't feel safe, that's kind of a little bit your default. And you said it's the opposite of confidence. And I think it's not the opposite. I think it's an effect of it. So if we're not feeling confident, we need to be right. We need the safety to say, I've got the solution. This is the way things need to be, because we're not I think that when we do feel confident and we're low on stress, we can be wrong and still feel confident. And we can be wrong and still believe in ourselves. And that's where, and I've learned a lot of this from you, is that's where that curiosity gene comes in. Rather than striving to be right, we feel grounded, we feel confident, we feel open to learning a different perspective.
No, I think you're right about that. Like when have low resilience like that, there are certain things I feel like I can't be with. Like I can't be with someone else in their soft, vulnerable pain. It's like too much for me. I don't have any bandwidth for that.
Same.
And that's maybe sometimes when I come in and like try and be right. And so, yeah, you're right. It's like, I just don't have the resilience to be with that. And that would be another that would be another approach. I just don't have the resilience to be with this right now. And I'm really sorry. I feel badly about that, but at least it's not coming across as like, I can't listen to that, or you're wrong, or,
So we're talking about how stress affects our relationships. But so what can we learn from this? Like, how can we, I don't think the answer is to fight off stress. Like how can we, I guess, dissolve it some?
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it is learning to work with it. And I think the awareness is first. If you don't realize, because I think the other thing is like, when those voices get louder in my head, I believe them. When I don't have the resilience to really see the full picture, I've got, I believe them. Well, I am right. Well, that is annoying. Or why did she call me 5 times? And it's like noticing the thoughts, acknowledging that I'm stressed. I'm going to have lower resilience. It's more of like that meditation thing, watching those thoughts come and go, but I don't have to latch on to them and I don't have to believe them. And then, as always, vulnerability is a good antidote, because it's like, just like I said, I could say, hey, listen, I don't have bandwidth for that right now. That I don't feel like that. And if my partner's in a good place, that's not going to put us at odds. It might be a bummer, but there's going to be an appreciation for honesty. And of course, versus the other where it's like, you're wrong. And then that does create tension. So I think vulnerability, as always, is a good antidote. I told Tom this morning, I was like, I think I'm over vulnerability for a while.
It can tire you out. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. I know I shared this with you, but I'll share with everybody else that we had a FemFort retreat this weekend, and somebody sent me a text message and said she was exhausted and she felt like climbing into a cave. And I was like, oh no. And then she said, and I'm so glad I was there. And
well,
so
she specifically said because she had been so vulnerable that she wanted to crawl into a cave.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you some things that help me when I'm feeling stressed and I know it's affecting a relationship. One big thing and one small, very tactical thing. The big thing is, if I'm feeling stressed and I haven't identified why, it's way worse than if I just give myself a minute to say, what exactly is it that is causing you stress and angst right now? And it's probably a little bit of my Zen Buddhist tendencies, but once I identify it, then I can let it be. I don't know what that's about exactly, but once I say, okay, I'm stressed about dipping into my savings right now, and that's heavy on me right now. So once I really name it, it helps me to relieve the stress.
I mean, it's actually a coaching tactic, and we call it naming it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think,
Oh,
yeah. And partly because I think what's happening subconsciously is we're pushing it away. Like
Mhm.
I just don't want to, even like without knowing it. Like I'm not going to think about that. And that creates this whole thing. You move faster, faster, faster. But naming it goes, oh, and then what are you running from? It's
Right,
there. You know it.
right.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I have learned, and it is wild when I really stop and take a look at this, um, and it's stimulants. If we're feeling stressed, we want to go to sugar or caffeine, and
Hmm.
it is the worst thing that we can do. And I've learned this over and over again. When I'm feeling stressed, I'm like, oh, maybe I need a coffee because we see it as energy, but it really, really is really bad for our stress level. So
Yeah.
stay away from stimulants, go with the whole grains versus processed carbs. And it actually really makes a difference. And it also builds a foundation for serotonin in our gut, which makes us feel, interestingly, confident.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it is interesting how we want the thing that isn't going to help us, but we tell ourselves that it's going to help us.
Yep.
Maybe that's the dopamine and that initial relief, or just the like having of it, and I'm like, whew, but like really ultimately it doesn't because I walk in the woods. It's the last when I have back-to-back Zoom meetings and I'm stressed out, it is the last thing I want to do is to go outside and walk in the woods for 10 minutes. But it would serve me so, and it always does. When I make myself, I'm always like, oh my gosh, why did I not do this earlier? And I think that's part of it too, is for me, I have to remind myself that this is my pattern. I tell
Hmm.
myself I don't have time to go for a walk in the woods. But when I do, I feel better. And I have to like stop and remind myself, oh, this is that pattern. And then
Mm,
that's how I can
smart.
break it. It's the awareness of it. And then I can do something different. But I think not being aware of it, I think that's the killer. I think to keep going, to not slow down, to not admit that, ooh, there might be something here. I think that's the thing that keeps us stuck in our same
And
patterns.
also, I see stress build up in people when they blame it on circumstances over which they have no control. Oh my gosh, my boss this, the pressure this, the kids
Yeah.
want this, my husband this. When we blame it on all these other people, we become completely powerless to it.
Mhm.
But to stop and name the stress and decide, okay, what exactly can I do to affect this stress? That's powerful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think too, in terms of the relationships that are most important to us, I thought this the other day, like I let myself get really worn down. I've got the kids, I'm running around, and it's like, what if I treasured that relationship so much that I took care of myself so well during the day that I was really present for that relationship at night versus giving everything to the computer or the screen or the work or the whatever, which really isn't where my priorities are.
Hmm.
It is a shift in mindset, and I think, anyway, I think a lot of those tools like journaling and meditation and talking to friends, community, I think can help remind us of that because I
Absolutely.
do think it's a loop in the mind and the brain that just keeps going.
Interesting. I like to
Mhm.
hear what some other people see as how stress affects their relationships because it can't be just us. Surely not. So raise your hand and let us know, or come on the video, or however you want to do it, and let us know how you see stress affecting your relationships. Sorrel, you don't stress. Come on, man.
You never look stressed, that's for
Lord.
sure.
I'm the master of stressing.
I know what happens to you when you get stressed out. You lose your hair.
You are the best comedian on the face of the planet.
Oh, hair
I'm
loss.
going to make you a billionaire.
Okay, do it.
Uh, so, I'm sitting here reflecting, and what I see in my relationships is that when I stress and go inside to deal with the stress, it actually takes me away from the relationship.
Hmm, interesting.
So, I'm seeing the opportunity to begin practicing sharing the stress with my family member or my friend. I've been relating to the stress as if it's something personal.
Mhm.
If I share it, it might actually impact the relationship in a negative way. And so I kind of recoil and do my little thing to deal with my stress. And then when I'm good, I'll come back to the relationship. And I'm now beginning to relate in this conversation to my dealing with the stress openly with a family member or a friend as a way to expand and deepen the relationship. Because they may be feeling the same thing or something they're stressed about, that unless I share, I'm not creating an opening for them to share their stress as well. So I've been dealing with my stress in relationships inside, like in my own head, in my own space. I'll deal with it. When it's done, I'll come back and I'll be good in the relationship. So I'm looking forward to trying this new way.
I love that. I have this loop that runs in my head when I get really stressed, and I can tell how loud it is and how true it seems to me as to how stressed I am, which is very similar to what you say. I'm going to go away and I'm going to deal with this, and I'm
Yeah.
going to come back. And it's like a perfectionistic. And what happens is I start like shooting darts out over here at the people I love, through words or actions. Like I get, because the stress builds up.
Yeah. It's as if I make not as if I make myself wrong for being stressed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think the fear is if you go to the person? And maybe there isn't because you say you're going to try it, but is there a fear if you bring the stress into the relationship and share it with the person?
Yeah, for me, there is an aspect of that, right? Like it's not hypothetical with my grandchildren. I fear if I ask the questions I want to ask them, they'll go, "Oh my God, Grandpa's such a fuddy-duddy." uh, I mean, can you be fun already? How many times are you going to ask me about my dreams? It could be something as simple as that. I withhold, and perhaps I could say, I'm really curious about your dreams, and I'm afraid to ask you about them. You know,
I'm curious, what does it mean if you're a fuddy-duddy?
Like
Like I know what a fuddy-duddy is, but what does it mean to you?
it means this. I'm a baby boomer, and I can't relate.
Yep. And like, what does it mean if your grandkids can't relate to you? What's the worst thing about that?
Um, like I can't connect,
Yeah.
and be friends with
Yeah.
them. It's that balance of being friends, being loving, and at once also being someone who is the protector of quote unquote their future. And sometimes I find that balance a little hard. I'll err on the side of being really friendly and miss out on making a contribution, or err on the side of pounding in my contribution and miss the relationship altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I hear that's such a value of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you give so much thought to your relationship with your grandparents, though, because I mean, not everyone has that, but
Yeah.
might be a little off topic, but I do love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Sorrel.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tom.
Good morning, Kathryn. Good morning, Tara.
Good morning.
Um, yeah, such a good topic. Listening to this, Pharrell, a couple things come out to me. I think recognition that until you step out of what's happening and try to gain some awareness, the stress is likely to just keep building, and it's going to get, worse and worse. So I think that's a good a good insight, which I think reinforces the importance of trying to gain the awareness. And I also like what Sorrel was touching on with the creating the opening for the other person. It's probably a good starting point to presume that the other person likely has their own level of stress happening. It may be a lower level of stress or even higher level. And then if you're starting and trying to, create the opening in that way, probably a good, a good approach.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great reminder that the other person also has their stress. Duh.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to remind yourself of that is, I think it brings out compassion for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that when when I'm stressed, it takes me right to my like level one, like right here. Like this is the most important thing. And I lack the ability to look out and like think of others. And then I think you're right. Tara said it earlier, like, I think I'm the only one, right? I think I'm the only one who's experiencing this. But if you remember, we're more similar than different. It's like this person's going through something too. They're not, yeah. Yeah. And that creates community, builds the relationship, and yeah, like you said, can give us compassion. Yeah.
I think in listening to this, the first thing to ask ourselves is the question of the day, which is how is stress showing up in our relationships? I don't think we should even dismiss the fact that it probably shows up in our life partner or spouse, first and foremost. And to inspect that and see how I might be able to show up a little bit better for Mike makes me feel happy inside. So inspecting, I think, is the first step toward this, and then naming what that stress is about and separating stress from worry. Because I think a lot of what we're talking about is worry.
Mm-hmm.
And worry without action will eat us up. What about you, Kathryn? What's your takeaway?
Well, I think it's taking ownership and responsibility of my stress and saying, okay, I'm seeing it. What can I do differently? Because to that point, if I don't do anything, I don't get outside in nature, I don't laugh, I don't do those things, then I'm going to stay in that loop, and then I'm not going to be the person I want to be around the people I love. Mm-hmm. So how can I take responsibility and do something just a little differently? Like I said, sometimes it's like a 1-minute meditation because that's all I can muster, or it's a walk around like my house, not even the block. It's just like a walk, just something to shift because I think I think stress creates, you would know this better, but I think it just creates a loop. We just have to like interrupt the loop,
Yeah. Well, it blocks our health. I mean, there's so much science behind it. It blocks the health of our immune system, of our cardiovascular system, of our digestive system. It interferes with all of those things. So I'm with you. Like when I fall off my meditation practice, I don't notice it at first, but then all of a sudden I'm like, damn, I feel bitchy.
Yeah.
And I realize it's just that 10, and I only do it for 10 minutes in the morning, but wow, is it grounding?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a reminder.
Yeah. And I'm feeling called to go straight into the tenets because I'm sitting here going like laugh. Just whatever it does, it shifts your inner, it shifts who you are, like how you're feeling. So laugh. And then we always talk about the connection and love, like that builds that oxytocin. That's opposite of cortisol. It helps, so love. And then, I mean, the very one is stress less, like relax. What can you do? Take a deep breath, take a walk, and sleep. That's a huge antidote to stress, is getting that sleep, making sure that you get that, and eating plants. Like you said, go for those whole grains and plants. Don't go for the sugary, fatty stuff that we really want when we're stressed. And give. That's another thing. Get out. I remember my mom always said, if you're feeling bad about yourself, go do something for somebody else.
Yeah.
So give of your time, give of your love, and move that body. You got to get out there. We got to get out there and move that body. Thanks, y'all. It's been a great discussion. We'll see y'all next time. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, see y'all next time on the
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tara.